For this part of the project, we're going to symbolize the entire design by saving each part of the face as an individual symbol, and then later on we're going to animate the face by looking a variety of different directions. If you're following along with the book, we are going to skip around, but for now we're going to start on page 289. The first thing we need to do is to start selecting each individual part of the face and determine what needs to have its own symbol and how we can simplify this face to make it a little bit easier to animate. Let's go up to our timeline first. Now we don't need our sketch anymore, so we can actually select this layer and press delete and it will delete it away. Also, make sure all of your layers are unlocked at this time, but let's take this one layer at a time and turn off visibility for the accessories and for the face. And so all we're left with is our basic head that we did first. Let's start off by selecting the chin. I'll click on the chin, and with it selected, you can go up to Modify and convert it to a symbol. From now on, I'm going to start using F8, our keyboard shortcut, to start converting things to symbols. Whenever you create the symbol, just make sure graphic is the type that's selected, and you give it a very descriptive name. In this case, I'm going to call it face_chin. Keep the registration in the center, and we'll say OK. And remember, whenever you make a symbol, it's going to be saved to your library, and so this is where we can have it pulled up. Let's do the same thing now for one of the ears. I'm going to choose this left ear. We'll choose F8. We'll call this character ear, and say OK to that. We'll place that for there. Notice that when you create symbols, it brings everything automatically to the front of your object. So if you need to, you can hold down Command and press the down arrow until it places it back where it needs to go. Another way you can clean up your animation is by reusing the same symbols wherever possible. So for instance, though we have two different ears, it's essentially the same thing, and I can save a lot of RAM and memory time by just repeating and copying this one over to here. So I'm going to select this ear and delete it away, and I'm going to go to my library and let's drag on another copy or an instance of that ear. Now the problem with this is that it's facing the wrong way. So I'm going to Control click on it. We're going to do a transformation and we're going to flip it horizontally. So we'll put it on the other side, and now I can place it right where it needs to go. Again, holding down Command and pressing the down arrow till it aligns nice into place. This way it's the same ear, but it's flipped around, and I don't have to redraw the other as well. Now as far as the other parts of the head, we do have the hair, but if you think about the hair rotating or moving around, it's not necessarily going to move side to side. We're actually going to transform the shape of it as it moves. So I'm going to keep this as a regular shape, and I'm not going to save the hair as a graphic symbol. We're just going to keep it as the hair by itself. With this layer done, let's turn on the face so we can see it, and start selecting the individual parts of the face. I'm going to start off with the mouth. Carefully make sure you have the mouth selected. Hold down F8, and we'll call this the character mouth. Say OK. Let's do the same for his nose with it selected, F8. And for now, I'm going to do each of the eyebrows. For this one, I'm going to select both of the eyebrows. Well, no, I'm going to keep it one at a time. That way they can move closer together or farther apart if necessary. So with one selected, we'll hit F8. And again, since it's essentially the same character, I'm going to get rid of this one. Let's drag on an instance of our eyebrow, and then we're going to hold down Control and click on it. Do a transformation to flip it horizontally. Then all I've got to do is use my arrow keys to nudge it into place right here. Now the eyes are kind of an interesting little bit to characterize. Because the eyes, we want to keep them nice and consistent, but we want the pupils to be moving around. We want to be able to treat these as unique objects. I'm going to do something a little bit different from what the book will have you do. If you're following along with the book, on page 290 and 291, it gives you a series of steps that allows you to create the eye and break it up into multiple sub-layers. This is so you can blink the eye and give it full control. For this first project, we're going to keep it a bit simpler. So rather than having to create multiple different layers, we're simply going to treat the upper and lower portion of the eye as one object. Here's what I mean. Select the upper portion of your eyelid and hold down Shift and select the lower white portion. With both of these selected, let's create them as one symbol. So again, F8, we'll call this character I, and say OK. Remember, it's going to change the stacking order, so I'm going to do Command and down until my pupil appears. And let's also do the same thing for the pupils. Select the pupil and do F8. This will be character pupil. And say return for that. If you want, you can duplicate this and flip it over to the other side. So I'm going to get rid of this eye that we created. Select both the pupil and this one. You can either drag it in and place it. And let's do character I. There's one there. We'll place this right here. Again, we need to flip this around, so Control and click on it. Transform, flip it horizontal, and then Command and the down arrow to bring it down. Finally, I can use my Shift and up arrows to move it into place until it's finally right there. Now it's looking really, really good. And I recognize I forgot to symbolize the little tufts of hair at the top. I'm going to select both of them. You can do those individually if you want, but with them selected, F8, character hair tuft. I call it a hair tuft just to distinguish it from the main body of the hair. That's up there as well. All right, now that we've got all of our symbols on the face characterized, let's do the same thing for the accessories. We'll turn on the accessories. I can select the hat at the top. And if you remember, the hat was already turned into a little bit of a character, so it's already set and ready to go. The same way for our bandage. We've got our bandage already saved over here, so there's nothing on the accessories that needs to be created that hasn't already been done so as well. With this done, you can see all of the different kinds of symbols that we've already got created, ready to go to animate our character. But we're not ready to animate just yet. In order to do that, everything that moves on your character needs to have its own layer within the timeline. So in order to do this, we need to select everything that's on the stage by just clicking and dragging over it. Then hold down Control and click on it and choose Distribute to Layers. This is going to take all of our symbols, and if you look in your timeline, you may actually have to expand it down a bit more. You can see how everything now has its own individual layer. Now there are a couple of layers that are blank. So for instance, the accessories layer, you can see how it's got a blank keyframe. This is because it took everything out of there and put it into their own layer. If you have a blank key layer, like on the accessories, you can delete them away. There are some layers that don't necessarily have a name, like what's layer 45? Well, to determine that, you can turn on and off the visibility of it. If I do that, you can see that's my hair layer that I have. So if I want, I can rename this layer as my hair. Let's do the same for layer 48. What layer is that? I see it's the back of my face. And so if that's the case, I'll rename this one the character face. And I can see the actual face and head layer. They don't have anything within those. So I can select both of those, hit my little trash can, and delete those away. Now that I've got everything on its own individual layer, we can start animating the face and having it look side to side. With that done, I'm going to say show frame, so this fits nicely in there so I can see it, and I can also see all of the different parts of my face to animate. So the first thing we'll animate is having our character look slightly to the right-hand side of the screen. And we want to do this within the first half second. So to do this, I'm going to select the 12th frame and drag down to select all of them on every layer. When I let go, you can see that happens. With all of these selected, we can hit F5, and that'll give us some frame span for all the different parts. Now the first thing that I like to animate are the eyeballs, and so we want the whites of the eyes and then the pupils of the eyes to move at the same time. I'm going to click once on the left eyeball here, and you can see how it automatically selects the correct layer in our timeline. We're going to go to that 12th keyframe right here, and do F6 to insert a keyframe. This means it's going to move to this position. With it selected, let's go down to our stage. I'm going to hold down Shift as I arrow over once, twice. And you can see how that moves over to right there. Let's do the same now for his eyeball. Going back up here, you can see how it automatically selects the right position there. We'll insert a keyframe, F6, and then hold down Shift as we go 1, 2, but I want it to go all the way to the edge of his eyeball right there, so it's going to go a little bit farther. Looks kind of funny, but let's do the same for the next part. So with the eyeball selected, go up to your timeline, select this frame, hold down F6, and then remember we moved it twice, so let's go 1, 2, and then we can select the pupil itself. Let's give the pupil a keyframe, holding down F6, and then 1, 2, and have it nudge itself all the way to this particular edge as well. All right, so we've got his eyes moving from one side. Now we can apply our motion tween. You can go for each individual frame, so select the first keyframe. You can control click on it. Let's do a classic tween for there. Same way for the pupil on that side. Let's do the eye there, and then a classic tween to right there. Now if we were to play it, you can see the eyes shift to one side. Perfect. Now it's a simple matter of animating the rest of the character. Let's do his eyebrows next. So I've got eyebrow here and an eyebrow above it right here. For this one, we'll select it and do a keyframe with F6. Let's do a keyframe for this eyebrow too while we're at it. And remember, we moved it holding down Shift once, twice over. Let's select the other eyebrow and its keyframe. Oops, wrong one. Other eyebrow, its keyframe, and move it over once, twice as well to line it up. Once that's done, let's add in our motion tween. Creating a classic tween and our classic to that one as well. Now when I go back to play it, all of those move over as well. We're getting there. Let's do the same for the nose. With the nose selected, we'll select our final keyframe, F6. With that keyframe selected, we're going to have it go over here. And if you want, you could have it slightly rotate along this way too. So in this case, you can choose your free transform tool and maybe do a little bit of a cocked rotation to see that. When we go back, let's add our motion tween in between those two on the nose. Now when it plays to move, excuse me, not a motion tween, I'll remove that motion tween by just undoing it. I wanted a classic tween. There we go. Now when it plays, you can see it looks off to one side. Let's do the same now for the little mouth to have the mouth follow along as well. So with the mouth selected, we'll add a keyframe at the half second there, hitting F6, and we'll have the mouth move over, maybe not so much, maybe just a little bit. And then finally we'll add the motion tween or the classic tween between those two as well. So now we've got the face moving off to one side. Let's do the bandage. Select the bandage layer, go up to its 12th keyframe and insert one there. The bandage needs to move over. It's not going to move over off the skin, so we'll have it go all the way to the edge and just stop right there. Again, going up to here, control clicking on it, give it a classic tween so it doesn't have to move as much. And we've got the little tufts of hair that are up here. So with the hair tuft, give it a keyframe, move it over 2 shakes, do a classic tween for that. Now the rest of it's starting to come in. The ears are going to be kind of a unique little challenge. Because the ears are rotating in 3-dimensional space, the one that's on the left-hand side here is going to be moving in this way, but this ear is going to be moving back this way. So we actually want to have it look like it's rotating, this one going this way a little bit, and this one actually moving in just a little bit as well. So let's do it one ear at a time. I'm going to choose this rightmost ear. Excuse me, it's his right, my left. Let's insert a keyframe. And for this ear, we're going to nudge it over once, twice. And for this ear, we'll select it. We'll do a keyframe for it. Make sure just the 12th frame is selected. There you go. And we'll move it inward once and twice as well. So now it's actually moving this way. Let's test that out. So we'll create a classic tween for both of the ears. And now it looks like his head is rotating in for that way. Maybe it needs to move just a little bit more to keep it in line. So with that selected, we'll have that move that way. There we go. He's got some big ears that are sticking all the way out. The final thing that we need to change up is naturally going to be his hair. As he rotates in, the hair needs to kind of morph and change as well. So we're going to do kind of an interesting little change of its shape. With the hair selected, we're going to insert another keyframe at the end. And with that frame selected, we want to be able to modify the shape of the hair so that it looks like it more naturally fits his head as it rotates. For instance, you can see his little sideburns are already off, and it won't necessarily look like this once the head rotates. So here's how we're going to change it up. The first thing I would do is to grab my free transform tool, and with that one I can hold down the option key as I click on this edge. Let's bring it in just a bit more, so right about there. So how far it moved. Then I can use my regular move tool, the black arrow. I can click on the corners of it. Whoops, carefully click on the edge of it. You may have to deselect. There we go. We want to see that curve, and I can readjust the curve to match for here. Let's click on this corner down here, carefully making sure that we get just the corner itself, and we'll reposition it, and then we'll match the curve of this one, maybe even clicking on this edge and this curve of the corner. We'll move up this way. There we go. Now with that done, the type of tween that we want to create, if we hold down Control and click on this, is going to be a shape tween, because we're changing not necessarily the movement of it or the position, but the entire shape itself. This will give you this orangey brown kind of arrow. To test it out, we can scrub through. You can see how the shape is going to change as it moves from one side to the other. The final thing that we obviously need to change up is going to be the shape of the hat. When I go to the 12th frame, we'll go to the hats layer, we'll give it a keyframe there, and I can see that the hat is losing a little bit of its size as well. So we'll choose our free transform tool, hold down the option key, and we'll reposition it. Notice that when that's done, we also need to create a classic tween for that one, and it will change up the little simple shape for it as well. Excellent. Now we've got our character looking from one side into the middle, and we can go back and forth. Remember, to test this, you can go up to Control and test your movie. This will open up the little tester, and you can see it is moving very quickly, but otherwise it's actually working well. Let's have it move back to the center of our document as well, or back to the center of the stage. To do this is actually quite simple. If you go to your timeline, we want the first frame to be what their character is going to return to. So I'm going to select the first frame by selecting the top lowest layer, hold down Shift, and click on the very bottom to select every first frame on every layer in between. So with all of those first frames selected, you can go up to Edit, down to the timeline, and let's copy the frames. So copy these frames. There we go. The next thing we do, go to your timeline under 1 second and select all of the different frames that are below that 1 second. So with all of those selected, we can go back up to Edit, Timeline, and let's paste the frames right into the spot. Now that we have a copy from here to their movement and back to here, you can see this is what it would look like. All we have to do is add the tweens in between them. So I'm going to select this one all the way down to here, You can do Control and click. Let's do a classic tween. For this one, we need to select this layer and create a shape tween. And then finally, these two layers can be selected, and you can create a classic tween in between those. Now you can see it moves from one side and then back to the other. And if we test it, this is what it would look like. Simply moving back and forth. The final thing we can do is add some custom easing in and easing out. So for instance, if I wanted to add easing in to him looking off to the right, we can hold down Shift and select all of these different parts of the tween. You don't have to have the entire thing. As long as some part of that motion tween is selected, this will work. Go to your properties and let's add some classic ease, and we're going to have it ease out, and we'll do just let's do a cubic ease out. Now we need to do the same thing for all the different parts, otherwise it's not going to line up. So if you've got any kind of motion tween here, make sure those are all selected. You can go to your tweening, ease out, and then we use a cubic ease out for those two. So now when it plays, it actually has a little bit of tweening for its movement, at least moving from one side. Let's do some easing in on this side. So I'll select all of those. Go to our tweening. We'll do an ease in for this case. And since we did cubic, we'll do cubic ease in for those. Again, select these three by just clicking and dragging over those. Go back to your tween. Let's do an ease in, cubic that way as well. Now when we test it, it's moving much more naturally and bouncing back and forth this way. Very good. Now to finish out this project, I want you to animate your character looking to the left, looking up, down, and then finally back to the center, doing all of those movements within 4 seconds. I'll let you determine the time and the pacing that you want for each different type of movement. All of the movements need to have good easing in and easing out of all the parts, and for the most part it should look relatively believable. Now to help you out for this project, when I'm finished animating mine, I'm going to upload it to the class Moodle page so that you can have a look at it to see exactly how I set up my animation, and you can pattern yours after mine. It shouldn't look exactly the same. You should have your own unique style and flair to your character and the way you animated it. But the way it's set up should be relatively close. Once you finish with yours, you're going to turn in the Adobe Animate Flash file. You can upload it to the class Moodle page once you're finished.